First, breaking Bradfield. The civil engineer Dr J.J. Bradfield designed Sydney's heavy rail system early last century. It's been robust enough to take double-decker trains since 1960 as the backbone of commuter services moving millions of people. Last week, two consortia, comprising nearly 30 Australian and international companies, were shortlisted for the Operations, Trains and Systems contract for the O'Farrell Government's North West Rail project. The winner will be announced late next year. Unlike the South West Rail extension, Glenfield to Leppington, the 23-kilometre North West Rail project is to be a public-private partnership, but crucially with single-deck trains and a smaller tunnel configuration incompatible with Bradfield's existing heavy rail network. A single-deck network will be extended in future years across the harbour. Critics of this separately engineered system say commuter rail in this state has reached a point of no return.
I don't apologise for having a point of no return. Public transport infrastructure has fallen behind where it should be.
I know, but it's the compatibility, the interoperability of the system that you're putting in place with a single deck, smaller tunnel boards alongside the existing heavy rail network. That's the point of no return.
Exactly. But every major city has a similar system.
This state's greatest civil engineer, J.J. Bradfield, would be turning in his grave, according to GAVIN GATENBY and COLIN SCHROEDER from the not-for-profit public transport advocate Eco Transit.
Small bore tunnel dimensions.
Bradfield was a genius, but he would have been horrified to see this kind of non-standardised operation coming in and breaking up the system.
And I go along with the government. I am a minister.
At a recent public forum, Greg Smith, the O'Farrell Government's Attorney-General, but here as the member for Epping, faced constituent hostility over North West Rail.
But I'm one voice in Cabinet, and I stick up for this area all the time.
Locals support Eco Transit's complaints that the O'Farrell Government specifications for single-deck metro or rapid transit trains for North West Rail, extending in so far unscheduled future years with a new harbour crossing to Hurstville, Bankstown, Liverpool and Lidcombe, will come at the expense of what's called interoperability.
We are getting infrastructure we never had. You, sir...
Of immediate concern, North West passengers would have to change trains at Chatswood to access the existing citywide network. Under pressure, Greg Smith held the Cabinet line.
Those people out there, 600,000 people, have had nothing. And they're going to get something. They're getting a very good rail service.
I believe that it's about attempting to drive through the breakup of the City Rail system into various parts and to privatise it.
You can have 12 services an hour, a turn-up-and-go system where people don't even have to look at a timetable. That's what you get on a single-deck system, versus a double-deck system where you only get 4 trains through an hour and customers have to wait up to a quarter of an hour or more.
Let's be clear, is a separate, incompatible, privatised system.
It's not incompatible at all. All around the world, people transfer from one network to another. And in fact, every day as we speak, about 100,000 people change services at Central Railway Station, for example.
Transport Minister Gladys Berejiklian steered the Rail Futures plan through State Cabinet last June. In its now famous letterbox contract with the people of New South Wales, it is true the Coalition promised South West and North West Rail. In government it is delivering, but at no time was privatisation through a separate metro or rapid transit system on the agenda before the 2011 election. In fact, this animated government video promoting North West Rail depicted a double-decker heavy rail system extension for the North West, not a single-decker, and there's no mention of a privatised operator. That was your intention, to have a double-decker extension of the heavy rail network.
When we came to government, that was our intention.
Now, I know you can't breach Cabinet solidarity, but it's been put to us, particularly with Infrastructure New South Wales, headed by Nick Greiner, being opposed to North West Rail as a public transport project, that you were rolled in Cabinet. You really did, as Minister for Transport, want an extension of the heavy rail system, and you were forced to compromise with this separate privatised system.
I'm not breaching any confidence by saying that is definitely not the case. What I put as the best solution is the solution we have, and I'm very proud of that.
There's now a furious debate about the single-deck train's passenger carrying capacity compared to double-deckers, and what are called dwell times at stations, and the technical term loading gauge, the minimum size for rail tunnels. A single-deck tunnel has less space for emergency escape routes compared with double-deck train tunnels.
Around the world, railway systems have standard loading gauges, and you build to those standard loading gauges or bigger. You don't compromise the whole system by building smaller trains. It just doesn't make sense.
The Transport Minister rejects all objections about specifications, saying the dual system, heavy rail double deck with rapid transit single deck, will lift public transport capacity by 60%.
Modern single-deck carriages, for example, can carry more people on each service than a double-deck carriage. And when you multiply that by 12 services an hour, you're carrying more people per hour on a single-deck system than you can on a double-deck system. And we're not saying that double-decks don't have their place, they do, but in a modern network, you have those three tiers working together.
If they build the tunnels south and potentially under the harbour and into the city to this much smaller diameter, then it means that double-deck rolling stock won't be able to use them in the future, high-speed rail won't be able to use them. It'll just be limited to this one flow of people coming from northwest Sydney. And one thing we absolutely have to do in Sydney is to get 2 more tracks across the harbour. And if we have 2 more standard City Rail tracks across the harbour, we can increase capacity to every railway station in Sydney. We can increase the frequency of services by 50% right across Sydney.
Stations at 40 metres.
Later this year, New South Wales's rail transport system will go beyond the point of no return when the government awards a $1 billion contract for North West Rail's single-deck tunnelling. This state will have a private operator on a standalone rapid transit system. But significantly, the Minister, whose reputation and legacy is now on the line, insists the government will set and control fares in line with the existing network, not the private consortium.
Quentin, at the risk of sounding immodest, I would say JJ Bradfield would be very proud of what we're doing, because we're turning our system from an old, clumsy one into a modern one. And the agenda we have for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years is the most ambitious our state has ever had in relation to public transport.
If only we knew what JJ Bradfield really thinks about the end of the line that's now coming for his Sydney heavy rail system.